Greetings and welcome. I'm Psychic Medium Roberto, and I truly hope you are doing well. I am guided by Spirit. Trigger warning: the subject matter is of a mature nature and deals with true crime events. All cases are treated as alleged until proven in a court of law. Now, I'm going to be looking at the case study of Kathleen and Michael Peterson. And unfortunately, this is quite a dreadful picture in that Kathleen was found at the bottom of the staircase. As the case goes, she tripped and fell, according to her husband, who was outside at the time, and said after 2 a.m. or something, came inside and found her. Very convenient. So, long story short, he was originally convicted of the murder, of the crime of murder. And then, over a period of time, fought for his name and appealed the case, and was given time served, which was approximately just over 7 years. But to this day still proclaims his innocence. So I thought, let's have a look at it. We'll have a look at Kathleen, her date of birth, and where she was at the age she was. And I'll just see here, 49, 13, 4. We'll do a profile on her date of birth. Then we'll do a comparison with Kathleen and Michael in terms of who they are each or individually, and then do a comparison. And then we'll get into the crime itself and have a look at that. So Kathleen, born February 21, 1953. We have the 2132, so she has an outcome 23.5 in the day. So if we combine the two from the February and the 21.3 and the day that she's born, so in effect, when we're dealing with the day and the month, this is the block here. This is the way the world sees Kathleen in this block. And this is who Kathleen is to the world. And what I mean by that, this is who she is in the day. That is Kathleen, 23.5. So a bit of the backstory, I believe when she met Michael, she was an executive, high corporate executive. And of course, Michael did most of the time in the army, was a veteran from the Vietnam War, and then obviously then became a writer. But she had been previously married to a physician. Now, the year that she's born in gives us the 18.9. That's also the 18.9 year. It speaks about higher learning, the higher self. It's the Buddha number. And even, let's just say, Kathleen gets to 55, for example. Just as an example, she can actually, she puts down the corporate apron, if you will, and she can become very spiritually orientated. In the golden years, retreats, even meditation, mediumship. But in a corporate environment, this is also a very creative, solution-driven number. And when you're dealing with 23.5, you're dealing with large groups. So, of course, they had a blended family, children from previous marriages, 23.5. That's what it talks about as well, bigger groups. And mixed groups. Okay. The 2 is where we find her heartbeat and her emotional center. It is a water number. It's the emotional number. It's also an engaging number, family number. And we note she has a 41-5, 32-5. So she is a 14-5-5 life path. So 14-5 is a very good business number. Import, export. But life path 5 can bring around some difficulties, and also very good with money, but on the negative can be very bad with money, right? Because when a 5 goes bad around money, there could be issues. But so overall, very good higher learning numbers. So her sequence of 5s, the 41-5, 32-5, this outcome is going to play a very significant role when we look at the comparing with Michael, because they are very same, so 32-5, very, very much the same outcomes, except for 50 with a 5 outcome, 5-0, that's a significant difference. And whereas Kathleen has the 41-5, but we'll come back to that in a minute. The year Kathleen was in was a 48-12-3 year. She was 48 years old with an outcome 12-3. Now, on one hand, the 12-3 speaks about being in comfort, being in a comfort zone, also in a community zone, but comfort. It's a gentle 12-3. It's not by any means a bad year. 3 also brings around the feminine energy. Feels like a woman. Strong energy, and a very connecting energy as well. Groups, communities. It's an engaging year. 14-5, I've spoken in political shows, can be the attaché, the conduit or the go-between 2 major organizations, 2 businesses, 2 groups. And 5s, by the way, can be very creative people as well. Very creative people. So, the year before, Kathleen was 47. She may have gone through a bit of a wobbly, shaky, bit of uncertainty in her life. And because she has the 2, this would have pinged on the heart center, relationships. Okay. Now, when we look at the 2, they're both very similar outcomes. So almost 2 peas in a pod, if you will. Of course, there are some differences. So where Kathleen has the 23-5, Michael has the power number 33-6, 24-6, and the 15-6. So the 33-6, now this is who he is in the day, right? 6 is a very engaging number, so he would be very approachable, connecting with people. The 33-6 brings out his level of capacity to handle large things. So if he was a big deal in the army, very creative number, is a creator, if you like, creates his novels, ideas, stories, ideas, visions. So 24/6 brings in the element of family. That is a family number. Then we got 15/6, who can be the guy that wants to be the guy. Do you know what I mean? Where he breaks away from family and his responsibilities and goes and has a night off or a day off or whatever, but having lots of fun as a human being. Can be deviant in ways. The difference here is, of course, he has the 10-1. So the 10-1 would have helped him as an army person. If you look at army as a group or an organization, 10-1. Company man. Would be responsible around money, 10-1. And he has the 23-5 as well, so community groups. And the 17-8 is, here we have the communicator, the 17-8. Now, based on the rumors, whether he was bisexual or gay, but in a heterosexual marriage, the 50-year, if we look at it on a human level and at a basic level, the 50 with an outcome 5 gives Michael the edge in terms of what he would prefer. Okay? And with that 50 outcome 5, it also gives him the propensity to prefer everything and anything. Now, the interesting conflict here where we see the 41-5 in the two of them, because below that and the outcome is the same, but there's one significant difference here. Michael wouldn't have an issue walking into a mixed bar, whether it's heterosexual, bar, gay, whatever. Whereas Kathleen is not really into that. Okay, 41-5. It's almost like the opposite. It's like destroying that, if you like. But the rest is fine. 23-5, groups, communities, relationships, no problem. But beyond that is a problem, I would assume, on Kathleen's part, based on her numbers. If we had to apply the pressure test, in other words, how would Michael respond in a worst case scenario? Right? So although he has very good numbers, international numbers as an author, 14-5, international author, very creative, lots of ideas, as I've already mentioned. But if we had to put him under a bit of heat, put him in a corner, if you will, how will he respond under pressure? So the 17-8s can bring around aggression. The 8 can be quite aggressive. But the 17-8 is also more about the verbal abuse that he would spew out. Okay? So you got the gift to the gab. So you can imagine if it goes bad and what would come out of his mouth, and having the 15-6 and the 14-5. On a wild night, he could spew out the devil. Can be very bad in what he says that comes out of his lips. And that's the juxtaposition with being the author, where you would write beautiful things, but the propensity is always there for the opposite in another form or capacity in the real world. 6 can bring around aggression. 6s can be it's an aggressive number. It's a violent number. It's an angry number. It is anger. And when you got all of these 6s, he can be like a little limpid bomb. The 14 5s can tell lies as well when under pressure. Like Michael Peterson, did you push your wife down the staircase after you beat her head several times? And he will say, no, of course not. I was sitting outside having my quiet time, having my drinks or whatever, and when I felt like going to bed, there she was lying at the bottom of the staircase. That's how I found her. And then he types the end. So just in a nutshell, now what's very interesting, you'll note they born 10 years apart, right? Kathleen in 1953, Michael in 1943. Now, because Kathleen was 48, she was in a 12-3 year. And we note Michael was 57, but in a 12-3 year as well. So what's interesting as a couple, okay, they were in sync with each other. Technically, as a couple, they were in sync with each other. There are differences in the makeup of their personality, let's say, their date of birth, if you will, that makes them who they are. Okay? But it's very interesting to note that they were both in a 12-3 year. And what is a 12-3 year? I have spoken about that. So when we jump to the main chart here, we see, just as a quick overview, we'll go detailed. In the summary window, 72 hours after the event has occurred, which everyone writes she died December 9, 2001. There is a discrepancy. I'm going to talk about it. So I flagged December 8. And the reason for that is, according to the autopsy report, she would have had to bleed out for at least 2 to 3 hours or 2 hours. Let's just call it 2 hours. The problem is when we arrive at midnight, when we get to midnight, 1 minute past midnight, we already have a 9 on the scene, murder. Which means, in my opinion, the event would have started here. But because conveniently, I stayed out till 2:30 in the morning, so left, okay, we'll get into that. 2:30, interesting, 2 hour gap there in that window, right? But in the summary window, numerology offers a 72-hour window where we get a summary of events. And what do we see here? 12-3 plus 12-3 and even plus 3. You got triple threes on the top. Actually, just was focusing on the 12-3s. This is super detrimental. No, that goes without saying, right? Too many of the same numbers is problematic. But what I find very interesting here is that we have a 12-3, 12-3 conflict. They are both in a 12-3 year. What does 12-3 speak about? Lifestyle. So in the reflection zone, we have that 12-3 conflict. Okay? Now, we see the 24-6, 15-6 in the exact same position, 24-6, 15-6. So, the energy around these threes. So, on one hand, the 3 also speaks about control. And when you have all of these 3s, it is about losing control in spades. This is crazy, out of whack. Too many 3s. Now, when you're out of control, we also have the 6s. And 6s in the negative on a bad night are very aggressive. And when you put all of that in one confined space, you have the outcome 27-9, but let's deal with 9 first, murder. So when you have murder, it's not, of course, accidental. Or we had a great dinner, we were both drinking, whatever, she fell down the steps, whatever. 27-9 brings in an element of premeditation. Okay. Now, because it's an overnight crime, in other words, the evening of December the 8th into the morning of December the 9th, the same applies for the reflection. So in the reflection zone on December the 11th, the evening reflection, the summary. First of all, look at all of these 8s, very aggressive, very violent. We note the 17-8 pings directly on Mr. Michael there. Preceding that, the 26-8 is a violent. So here's a good example, having spoken about the 6s and 8s. So when you have a combination of the 6 and the 8s, and the 2 is the couple. The number 2 is a couple, engagement, engaged in emotionally. 6, violence, aggression. And bad, unfortunately, we know the outcome, bad on the human body. 17-8 pings on Michael, homicide, very violent. So now we need to prove all of that, right? So we go to the event, but let's go a day or two leading up to the event so we get a rhythm and we get a flow of energy, what is happening with this couple. So from December the 6th, now of course December will bring around the 12 threes and of course 2001 threes. This is similar to 2024 in that it's an 8. And we're in an 8 month. Now, this is going to bring, in terms of the 8s, a lot of energy behind the 8s because we're going to have a lot of 8s in every day. I've spoken about the 8s in the previous episodes. Can bring a lot of situations. Now, in this sequence, we have a lot of 3s. So this is all about the feminine energy, the woman. And it's a ghastly number, unfortunately, for a woman to be found at a crime scene, particularly when there's a male involved. Because when there's spousal murders or males involved, is that they have no control. They have lost control when we see threes around a crime scene. On December the 6th, we see again all of these mass of threes going on. And I'm not liking the 89 in the middle of the day, knowing what we know now, right? Because the 89 reflects in the summary zone, right? Murder. Now the 21-3 will hint at, it will just hint at Kathleen, no more than that. But the 21-3 is speaking about this frustration that's boiling up within the relationship. Feeling trapped. Or let's put it this way, the opposite of comfortable. Now, when I was looking at these numbers and getting the chart ready, for me, there's a hint of either separation or divorce. Because, for one, in the reflection zone, in the reflection window here, these 3 days where we can get information, there's a 16-7 here. Can speak about serial behavior, so his behavior continues as normal. But when you look at it from a spousal marriage point of view, the 25-7 is 2 people in a marriage and there's an issue. Okay? And the 16-7 speaks about separation. 7 is marriage. So when we look at December the 7th, the day starts with 7. Now, the reason why that is important is because what follows next is 19-10-1. Whenever you see, for me, whenever I see a 19-10-1 around a crime scene, is problematic. Because it brings in the elements of money around a murder. 22-4-13-4 speaks about the writer, can also speak about the marriage certificate. And there's a possible endings here, 13-4, endings and new beginnings. So once this comes out, so let's just have a look here. We note on the day of the evening of the event, December the 8th. So we note on December the 8th, begins with an 8. Now 8 can bring around talking, communication, but because there is a 26-8 in the scene, so whatever transpired on December the 7th, which had a transactional value to it, whether getting a divorce, going their separate ways, who gets what, brings a measure of aggression, aggravation, anger. We have an 11-2 in the middle of that day, also a lot of uncertainty. Can speak about unlawfulness. And we now note there's a hidden 22. There's been an outburst here. If we look at it as an overview, what is the issue? 14-5. As an overview, not necessarily who it pings on, because it pings on both of them. So whatever the issue was, 14-5 is the issue. 14-5 does bring around, unfortunately, issues with males. 14-5 issue with males and what males like. keeping in mind the 50, 5, 0, and the 5 outcome gives him the propensity of a open spectrum of likes. Now there's an issue here for me, because there's also a 13-4 in play here. Which signifies children. Now, we could say that the marriage would impact their children. But if we're trying to identify the issue, all right, let's leave it there for now. You know, when you're in a spousal situation, you have this 14-5-5, and they're both 14-5. So this was like detrimental impact, obviously, as we know it. We note even again in the evening of the very early hours of December the 9th, all the threes, there's 4 threes, 5 threes, and it's also reflected in the summary zone. I mean, we're talking out of control. I didn't bring in the autopsy graphic because it's a little bit graphic, but of course there's a series on Netflix at a couple of outlets about the series. I did watch the documentary a while ago, a while back, and then a viewer, thank you, sent an email about the case, because of course ever since, I mean, we'll go through his court dates, but he's now kind of been set free, and now he's on a mission to save his name. I call bullshit. So again, this 14-5 here is the issue. It's a male. 14-5 is a male issue. When males behave badly sexually and possibly even illegally, because there is an 11-2 here. And where did I see that other? Here's 11-2 here. So there's also a level of illegalness around this issue that he may have had. So what happens? We go into the zone, chaos. Now, the impact 24-6-15-6-6 lands on this gentleman over here. That's one of his key identifying numbers in that distinguish him from Kathleen's numbers. And here he is here, filthy little rat, having his martinis or whatever he was drinking by the poolside. Now this is the heinous crime. And sorry to be a bit graphic here, but the fact remains, according to the autopsy report, she would have had to have bled out for at least 2 hours. So based on what I'm seeing, he murders her while he attacks her violently. She lays down at the bottom of the stairs. He steps over her and goes, or cleans up, but afterwards steps over her and he goes and sits outside for 2 hours, having his me time while Kathleen is bleeding out at the staircase, which means he could have called for help. So if we go back to December the 7th, there is a hint of premeditation, 22-4. The plan. Death. By a male. For male. Now if we look at the direct summary window, there he is there again. 24-6, 15-6. Guilty as all hell. With a level of premeditation. And premeditation, based on a document I read the other day, premeditation can even be 1 second before you decide to kill someone, because you have someone in a situation, then you make a decision to kill them. That is premeditation. So reflected in the summary and in the event sequence, we have the out of control threes. The perpetrator is highlighted again, and with the intention of murder. To keep his secret safe, hidden 22-4. I believe Kathleen may have taken some information to the grave that would have made Michael hide under a rock for the rest of his life. As a quick overview, just a summary, the verdict when he was first found guilty says again, there was an issue between two people. There's it there. There's hints of separation and divorce. Marriage in trouble. And there's an 11-2 as well. Whatever she discovered or whatever this issue was, there's a level of unlawfulness in what the argument was about, and of course what he did. When he now settles after some time, having served, I believe, just under 8 years or 7 years, round about there, accepts a plea deal, but the type of deal exonerates him from the crime type thing. Says he's innocent. Okay. So 26-8, the argument, reflected here in the summary zone. The 36-9 unfortunately speaks about the graphic nature of the crime. 369 is it's a bad death. And the 18-9 murder. So I don't know why he's trying to save his name, because he is the bullshitter. And he's been doing it for years. And I believe because of the year that he's born in, and particularly the era in which he grew up in, and particularly in these days, not necessarily now, keep in mind when he would have been in the army. If you looked at another guy in the 60s in the army, there'd be problems. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is an unfortunate case where convicted and then gets overturned. I don't think so. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please leave your comments and thoughts. I do love engaging with them, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay alert. Bye for now.